What is up, Scrub fam? I am back with another video. We just got done with Top Cut Regional here in Chicago. I did not attend the event, but of course I paid close attention to the event as it unfolded, and we had some pretty ridiculous results from the new Surge Leaders who just came out. Pretty happy about it. And so we're going to be talking about what we learned from Top Cut Chicago Regional, what we need to do going forward, and then also looking ahead to the Invitational this weekend, which I will be attending for sure. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Before I get started, let me get a shout out to my sponsor, Bearded Collectibles, Alec Pastrana, best shop owner on the planet. If you're looking to get your Series 9 product, because Series 9 is looking sweet, it's looking juicy, you need to go through Bearded Collectibles to get all of your sealed product. I'll put a link down in the description below. You can check that out. So, let's go ahead and get started in the video. So, the first thing we're going to go over is what we learned from Top Cut Chicago Regional. Well, mid-range is back, right? You had Beerus, you had Pan, you know, as decks that were true mid-range for such a long time, but then Surge Q took that, put it on its head, made the deck better entirely because the leader itself is absolutely absurd, and now you have a more true mid-range deck of the format. In some instances, it's almost like a control deck, not necessarily a mid-range deck, because the threats that it plays are relatively cheap, which we'll go over here in a bit, but it feels the closest to that mid-range, where it can kind of switch roles between aggressive and defensive just depending on the matchup. So Surge Q is the true mid-range deck, had a breakout performance, putting 5 copies into the top 16, and the top 4 was legit just 3 Surge Q and then 1 Broly BR. So, wildly enough, Surge Q is good. We found that out. Baby seems to have been weakened due to the appearance of Surge Leaders. So, the reason why I say that is because the Surge Leaders that are really popular, such as Surge Q, Surge Broly, they both have inherently strong abilities to help them defend themselves against Baby. So Surge Q can negate all the skills of the opponent's battle cards. Surge Q also has the ability to make himself a 25k for a turn. And then Surge Broly has the ability to kill something, ignore anything with barrier and KO it. So if your opponent's ever trying to go with a really big threat, like they really can't, because they can just get like harsh punished, especially if you're already in that threshold where you can start activating your ability. So again, Baby seems to struggle just due to that, as well as just due to the format's diversity. You're seeing more Hatchiyack, more Janemba, highly defensive decks, so Baby's having a harder time getting itself through all the switch rounds, making the top cut. Even with that, though, they still put 2 in top, and so I still think that Baby is good. I just think that people need to take a more combo-oriented approach, as opposed to trying to play the 6-drop, because that version of the deck itself just feels way too inconsistent, and you really need those huge, bursty kill turns, and Baby is the best leader to kind of provide those huge bursty kill turns. Next thing we learned is Gogeta Hero Revive isn't the finisher we thought it was. Everyone was hype and going crazy over Surge Piccolo because they were like, oh my gosh, with Gogeta Hero Revive, it's so busted. You know, they put you down to 0 cards in hand, etc. Well, we learned that Piccolo having to go down to 3 life can be a liability. Also, having to do it on turn 5 against these mid-range decks that are playing like Ultra Instinct Goku, that are playing Chompa the Trickster, and then have ways to recoup card advantage and maintain a high life total, they're really giving Piccolo fits. So I don't think that Gogeta Revive isn't the finisher that everyone thought it was, and I think everyone can just not be so afraid of the boogeyman as we go forward. Hatchiyack and Janemba are the safest picks for any event. The deck put 2 copies each into the top 16. That proves you, again, these decks are just incredibly consistent. They're a great way to get yourself to top cut an event, because of the way that they both inherently operate. You know, Janemba is a control strategy that has inevitability built in, has a win con built in, just through milling the opponent, and just plays all counters, all negates, extends the game, makes the game really, really long, and then just kills the opponent with the leader. And then Hatchiyack is just slows down every deck. You know, has the ability to make the game long, and turns 1, 2, and 3, yeah, there's not much that goes on in those matchups, but as the game gets longer and longer, the better Hatchiyack players are able to make better decisions, and that ends up getting them that extra win percentage. So Hatchiyack and Janemba, safest picks for any event. Fu Shrouded Mystery has reclaimed his throne. This card's always been absurd. The worry is that games wouldn't go long enough for it to see the light of day again, but guess what? We have decks that make the game last forever. And so Fu Shrouded Mystery is becoming one of the premier finishers in the format. And then lastly, we live in a world where threat efficiency is king, and the quote-unquote best decks thrive in the combo and the counter steps. Surge Q, as of right now, public enemy #1. You look at all of the deck lists, which I'll be going over in Rob Reese's here in a second, and you just look at how the deck actually just lives in the combo and counter steps and really doesn't commit to spending energy on their turn, you're like, this is just another story of, the Broly decks with Zeno button, those combo-based decks, but now you just have a leader that inherently gives you an opportunity to live longer, and these decks just become all about out-resourcing the opponent and then just winning the game slowly over time, chipping away, until you can get a kill shot in, or you can do a Mira plus Cooler plus Champa play, etc. So let's go ahead and jump into Rob Reese's deck list and something interesting to note. So, Rob Reese, congrats, man. You've had an insane run so far. You've had multiple tops back-to-back, multiple high finishes. You had the top 4 at Nationals, absolutely absurd. And then now you came back and went ahead and won the Top Cut Regional, which is sick. Over 200 participants. Again, congratulations. But the thing to look at and what I broke down was the true cost of the cards played. So the only thing that we really ignored here was going to be like super combos or free combo cards. So like super combos, Heavenly Darkness Demigra, etc. If you look at it, so the zeros, that represents your Heartfelt Plea. You're paying 0 energy for those. Your 1s, there's about 19 of them. Your 2s, there's 22. Low number 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, as you can see. So if you look at this deck and the way it's constructed, and a lot of people don't do this, but the average cost of the cards in this deck is going to be somewhere like around 2.5. Like, maybe even 3 is the medium average. But so this deck doesn't spend a lot of energy, right? And that's what makes this deck so powerful, so good. That's why it was so such a great pick for this event, because we're still trying to, people are still trying to combat, those hyper aggressive strategies that Baby was offering. So now we're playing this version of the deck, which really is going to be reactive focused, with very little ways to kind of go aggressive in the games that it's playing. But it's just trying to take advantage of the format. And then, of course, I don't think this deck is going to be perfect for next week's event. I think you're going to have to make a lot of changes and make these builds either more aggressive, or you're going to have to make them either more defensive with higher payoffs. But the reason why Rob was able to win the event is because his deck was incredibly efficient. He had cheap threats, he had answers, and then he had just like cards that were generated a high amount of value, made the game go long, and then he would end up getting the kill with either his leader or Mirror Creator Absorb, because the leader is absurd, and of course Mirror is busted. And then he was playing Fu Shrouded Mystery in the main deck to go over the top of everybody, because a lot of people weren't playing Fu Shrouded main. So this is the nature of how the format's going to progress from here. So I mean, you have to look at this as your starting point. So that means if you're playing any aggressive deck, right, your aggressive strategies have to be as energy efficient as these decks that have all the answers. Because if they're not, then all the answers just punish you. Because anything that's it's an answer that costs 2 or 3, and you're playing something that costs more than that, 3, 4, you're just going to get punished so hard tempo-wise, and then of course just the counter cards themselves. So the reason why Rob was able to capitalize out on that is because his deck just did that to the max. He was also good in the mirror match with having multiple copies, like 4 copies of Exploding Weakness, as well as 3 copies of Frost, Deadly, and Poison. He was not letting anything happen, anything resolved. He was keeping his opponent's board clear, and he was presenting threats like Bardock, Raider's Warcry. He had Topos lingering on board. He had Beer's No Holds Barred on board, going into Heartfelt Plea. So his deck has a very finite amount of finishers, but in general just has all these controlling cards in order to be able to make the games go longer and just to punish anybody that's looking to put any amount of energy into their threats. So congrats again, Rob. Beautiful deck list. I know Colin Kaiser played a very similar deck, almost card for card. There were some slight changes here or there, but again, congrats to you. Amazing deck. So we're heading into Orlando. So my thoughts on the format, my thoughts on the metagame, all these numbers are just predictions. They're not facts. I do think that Surge Q is going to make up 20+% of the field. Everyone saw this deck operate. Everyone's going to have the expansions in their hand. And everyone's going to be trying to get all the cards they need to play Surge Q. Whether if it's red-yellow or red-yellow-blue, someone's going to be playing this deck. A lot of people are because of how strong it is. The next thing is Surge Broly. People think that Surge Broly is an inherent counter to Surge Q. I don't necessarily think that version from last weekend of Surge Broly is that counter, because I think those versions are too slow and reliant on the game going long, in which I think Surge Q just plays a better long game. And then Surge Broly taking up 12.5%. I think it's just, again, going to be popular. I think the only thing that might be wrong about this prediction is that the cards to get, like the Leaders of Promo, might kind of hold this back in numbers, but I think people recognize how strong the deck is. Janemba, I think, is going to be the third most represented deck. Surge Q is inherently weak to Janemba because Janemba is only going to be initiating combat one time per turn on average, and they have so many different counters themselves. They play a very similar game, but they just have inevitability built in. Whereas Surge Q decks, if they're playing the ones from last week, they're not fast enough, they're not going to be able to kill you in time, and Janimba's going to have plenty of time to be able to interact with you. So Janimba, I think, is going to be the third most represented deck and is the inherent counter to the strategy. Next is going to be Surge Piccolo. Surge Piccolo, again, like I said, I don't think Gogeta Revive is where you thought you need to be. I just think the deck just needs to play better cards. So yes, you could still play Gogeta Revive, but I think you also need to include better yellow cards to be able to interact with strategies like Surge Q, Surge Broly. Hatchak, again, popular deck. I think it's going to be down at 10% though, just due to the deck is not fun to play and the deck goes to time. So that's something to keep in mind. And that's not fun to play is my own personal opinion. Spelled the Hatchak wrong on the background, but it doesn't matter. It's Hatchak now. But in general, I just don't think people are going to be super stoked about playing the deck, but I think it will perform well. Baby, I still think people are going to be trying to make the deck work. It's still really strong. Still one of the fastest decks in the format. And then I think there's going to be, again, that diversity. That's the one thing about the Dragon Ball Super card game. Even when there's money on the line, people still stray away from playing the best deck. So I still think we're going to have 25% of the decks just be other, just nonsense things that you weren't thinking about, or just things that people like to play. So with that being said, here's my thoughts on how you want to approach this upcoming weekend. I think just a few things to keep in mind is if you want to take the hyper-aggressive route, you need to make sure you have game against Janemba and Hatchiak. So that just eliminates Demigra off the bat, because Demigra just has no game against Hatch. First thing is Baby going pure combo. So focusing on getting rid of those Apocalypse Grudges 6 drops, focusing on just going the 4, the 5 into the Great Ape, all on your turn 3, and just making the game end as quickly as possible. Next thing is Surge Broly. I think you just need to make that deck more aggressive. I think the version, like I said, from this past weekend, I think it was good for this past weekend, but I think the faster you can be with this deck, the better off you're going to be, and I'll be showing you something here in a minute that you can take a look at and maybe get a general idea. And then U6. This is definitely more of a sleeper pick. I just think that people are sleeping on this archetype a lot. Being able to tap down your opponent's energy is incredibly strong, and U6 is just a deck that just does it more than anybody else and kind of takes advantage of anyone that's trying to just use counterplays and negates. So I really like U6. The next thing is denying the use of the combo and counter steps with game against hyper aggressive and Janemba. So Surge Piccolo with yellow and better payoffs. So what I mean by that, KMG the Majestic Ruler. Card is criminally underplayed. Surge Piccolo is going to get to turn 6. So I would recommend playing KMG the Majestic Ruler, because if you ever play against Surge Q, if you read all of the text on all of their cards, they're all went into the battlefield effects, and King Vegeta kind of turns that off for when you need it to, and then you're good to go. Like, you need a space of time to be able to cut all those cards off, and if you want, you can also play Victory Strike in the deck, because we all know how that combo works. But I think you want to play King Vegeta the Majestic Ruler. It's going to do a ton of work in your main deck right now. Next thing would be Victory Strike decks with yellow. This could also be Surge Piccolo with Victory Strike. But again, you need to play yellow to be good against the hyper-aggressive decks, and you just need a threat that can kill Surge Q even when it's at a high life total. So Victory Strike is key. And then the next thing I think is just be the slower version of Surge Q in the mirror. Main deck larger threats that can get around counterplay. So King Vegeta 5, King Vegeta 8-5, giving all your ace barrier is kind of strong. So if you play King Vegeta 5 for some reason, you might not, but I think the card is great still. Being able to play it and then make all your apes in play, have barrier, very strong, and it's a 5-drop, 25k, double striker, can help close a game, maybe one copy, and then the 6-drop. So Majestic Ruler. Even playing it in the mirror is still a great option, because, again, getting this on the board, you're playing in the mirror, you know what your cards do and you know what they don't do. And King Vegeta the Majestic Ruler turns both those off. And then, of course, playing more Food Shroud and Mystery is always helpful. Next thing would be play more answers, play more Denial Host, play more Exploiting Weaknesses, play more of your counter cards so you can take advantage of this matchup and be the better, slower version of the deck. So when you play the mirror head-to-head, you can make the game go longer, and the longer it goes, you can put it in your favor as opposed to the opponent's. Stop making it about the top deck war based on who's going to draw what, and make it about, I have better cards in my deck for this matchup. So that's the other way that I would approach it as well. So at this point, as you can see, I'm recommending 3 different approaches. Be hyper-aggressive, so be fast. Be controlling, so deny the use of the combo and the counter steps. And then just be the slower version of Surge Q in the mirror, so go bigger. So those are the 3 things I would recommend heading into this weekend, unless you want to play one of the strategies like Janemba, like I said, which is an inherent counter to the strategy itself. That's kind of where I lean right now. And then so let me go ahead and go into my pick for the actual event. So my pick would be Broly Surge, a more aggressive of the deck itself. Main reason why it's more aggressive is we're playing 4 copies of Saiyan Kaba main. And we're also playing 4 of the Gogeta Resonant Explosion, because ideally what this deck wants to do is come out of the gate hard and fast. Just how I like it, baby. So ideally your turn 2 is going to look like turn 2, play Saiyan Kaba, swing, take a life, combo with a Goten, draw some cards, and then put into play Gogeta Resonant Explosion. So you're going to be able to get a 25k double striker, then you're going to have the Gogeta on board to double strike as well. So you're going to be able to get damage in quickly, and you're trying to tighten the window, make the window incredibly small that the opponent gets to respond to you, and make the game drastically worse for them as it goes on, because they're going to have to keep defending these swings, and people don't have mass removal effects. So you can start building the board. And then the one thing you're going to have to do is just keep your Denial of Hope open for Exploiting Weakness if you're playing against decks that play Exploiting Weakness. Same thing with Focus Breakthrough, keep that open. But in general, you're trying to tighten the window on these decks as quickly as possible, and so that's what this deck is looking to focus on. Once you do that, once you narrow that gap in that window, it's very easy to take over the game with Broly 6 Tragedy Foretold. You can either leave it on boards to disrupt your opponent's combo phase, or you can go into Heartfelt Plea in this deck. And then, of course, we're playing the Secret Rare Raditz. That card is just absolutely snapped. Like, taking the game to the 5th turn, getting this into play, like, the game is going to go long. You're going to find your Secret Rare more often than not, unless it's in your life. And the longer the game goes, the more it tilts in your favor. Because if they can't interact with your board, you have a big board of threats that are turning sideways, that are big, you're going to end up winning the game. And, of course, the Broly leader, Surge leader, is absolutely absurd. So this deck just tries to take advantage of that, punish the opponent with, counterplay cards where you need them. Like, we still play Vegeta the Cruel, we still play Exploiting Weakness, we're still playing some copies of Crown Retribution, so we can be, that deck that can switch roles. So have that early aggression, but be able to switch to a more controlling playstyle as the game starts to go longer. And then sideboard, more Focus Breakthrough, more After Image, another Denial of Hope. We have TNs, we have Taos, another Topo, another Exploiting Weakness. We're playing 2 Kaioken for Hatchak, as well as Janemba, and 2 Fruit Shatter Mystery for Hatchak, Janemba as well. And then any games where we're going first and we're playing against a strategy that we know is going to go long, Fruit Shatter Mystery is great for that too. But as you can see, this is my current 65. This could change for the event itself, but this is where I'm sitting before the event starts. I'm incredibly excited for the Invitational this weekend. PPG always puts on amazing events. So guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Hope it makes your preparation easier for the Invitational coming up. And I hope that you guys all have amazing success. Be sure to check out the Patreon if you're looking for additional helps, tips, articles, playtesting, whatever you need from us. Hit us up through Sheet Productions on Patreon. I'll go ahead and put the link down in the description below. And again, thank you guys so much for everything. Bye!